All right, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, not sure. But today we have a very specific task to do. We have finished reading In Cold Blood, theoretically, and we are getting ready to wrap it up and getting ready for the quest, the quiz/test. So what we are going to do today is you guys are going to develop questions that you don't even need to know or have the answers to. But in the world of questioning, all questions are not created equal. And there are some questions that are easier and some questions that are harder. And you guys know that from taking lots of tests over your 13 years of schooling. You guys know that there are some questions that you can answer in one word or with one number, and there are other questions that you need to provide a much more elaborate answer to. So that's what this is going to kind of elicit from you. So your task today, this is a one-day task. Okay, so I expect everyone to turn in, the thing that you're going to turn in is a Google form, but everyone should turn in a Google form today. What you're going to do is you're going to review this document, or as you are doing right now, watching me review the document, and you're developing one question per level. We're going to go through 6 levels of questions. You can think of them as like a ladder. We're going to start at the ground floor, the ground level, and take one baby step, and then we're going to keep going up that ladder of complexity in both our questioning and the answers that the questions require. Okay, so you're going to submit your 6 questions through a Google form, which looks like this. Okay, please develop one question per level. The only required answer is your name. So even if you can't think of a question, do what you can. So the form is very straightforward. This is my recall question. This is my comprehension question, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it should be pretty straightforward and simple. I recommend having this form in one tab and the document in another tab so you can toggle back and forth. Okay. The questions that you guys are going to submit today, right? I'm right in this middle section. These questions are going to serve as the basis for your quest, your quiz/test on the novel. And you can see the dates right there for when each section is scheduled to take that quest. Okay, but you guys are building the quest for me. I am going to take all these Google forms, all the period 3 forms, all the period 5 forms, all the period 7 forms, and I'm going to take all the questions that you create and then put them all in a document and give you guys kind of choices, right? So you'll all have to answer a recall question, but I'll give you probably like 3 or 4 or 5 choices of recall questions that people have developed. And then you'll have to answer a comprehension question, and you'll have some choices about what to answer there. But all the questions are going to come from you guys, not from me. So without further ado, let's start learning about these levels of questions. So at the very ground floor, right, our first rung on the ladder, our first step up on the ladder is recall. And these are the simplest level of questions. This is like a 2 + 2 = 4. It's in your memory banks, or it's right on the page. You don't really have to think all that much. So some question stems that can get you started here are, what do you remember about blank? Or what is the definition of blank? Or identify blank. Who was blank? Which one blank? What is blank? Okay, your answers, right? Not that you have to have the answer, but the answer to the question is probably only a couple words at most. So this is character questions, setting questions, simple plot type questions, things like that. Okay, so if you want to pause the video and go over to the form and quickly type in a recall question because it's fresh in your head, you can do that now. All right, moving on to comprehension questions. Okay, to answer a comprehension question, you must understand, interpret, and/or summarize the main ideas of the material. So the answers are probably not right on the page, and you need to think a little bit harder to get to the response. So these are compare-contrast questions. What's the main idea of? What happened when? Right, so those are plot type questions. What can you infer from? How would you describe? How could you rephrase? So as you're thinking about In Cold Blood, these are fairly simple questions, but you do need to know something to answer it. Okay, so these answers are probably a little longer than a couple words, maybe a sentence, maybe 2 sentences. So if you want to pause and go over to the form and try to write a comprehension question about In Cold Blood, you should do so now. All right, moving on to application. This is our third step up the ladder of question types. So for application, you really have to know your stuff to be able to apply it elsewhere. And these questions ask you to apply an idea that is known to a new context in order to solve a problem, make a prediction, which is often how we use these types of questions when it relates to literature, or relate it to experience. So what would happen if, right? Think about plot stuff. What would have happened if one little element of the plot was changed? Okay, that'll kind of prompt a person to make a prediction or to think about how the plot would have been different. What examples can relate to blank? What if a character blank? What would have to change in order for blank? What would you solve, or how would you solve, or what would you do if, right? What would you do if is like a personal reaction question. Like, what would you do if you were married to the investigator and he was devoting so much time to the case? Or what would you do if a crime like this happened in your town? Things like that. So if you want to go over to that form, put in an application question, pause this video, you should do so now. All right, moving on to analyzing. These last three, this 4, 5, and 6, are, again, higher on the ladder, right? So they require a little bit more thinking. They also require a little bit more of an in-depth answer. So level 4, analyzing. These questions require a bit more than all the previous ones. Analysis is when you examine and break information into parts by identifying motives or causes. So these can be things like discuss the pros and cons of something, or how is blank related to blank, which I've kind of been prompting you to think about the entire time. How is cereal related to In Cold Blood? But you could break it down. How is the crime? How are the crimes related? The people? How is Dick related to Jay? How is Adnan related to Perry? Things like that. What is the theme of? Okay. What ideas validate the claim that blank? What explanation is there for blank? So that explanation, maybe you're looking back into Perry and Dick's childhood experiences and asking a question about explanation for their current actions based on their past. What is the relationship between? And that can be between characters. It can be the relationship between events, or it could be the relationship between the book and something else. How would you classify, or what conclusions can you draw about blank? So with that analysis, those analyzing question stems fresh in your head, why don't you pause this video and go over to the Google form and type in an analysis question. All right, moving forward to evaluation, level 5. We're getting to the top of the ladder. Evaluating is not just about asserting your like or dislike opinion, right? We often think of evaluation as like, do you like it or do you not? But it's about making informed judgments about the value or quality or validity of ideas or information based on a set of criteria. So stems for this type of question are, what choice would you have made if blank? And you can relate yourself to one of the characters, the investigators, the author, right? What choice would you have made if you wanted to write about this crime? Do you agree with the actions of blank? So maybe that's about a character. Do you agree with the outcome of blank? Would it be better if blank? Based on what you know, how would you explain blank? Why did the character choose blank? How would you rate the blank? How would you rate the investigation or the escape route or whatever? And what is the most important blank, right? What is the most important piece of evidence left behind? What is the most important step that the investigators took? And anything like that, okay? So why don't you pause the video and go over to the form and type in an evaluation question. The last type of question, level 6, we are at the top of the ladder. These require the most complex thinking and the most complex explanation in your answer. are synthesize and create questions. So synthesis is when you bring together parts of knowledge to form a whole. You have all these little, right? If my fingers are all different pieces of information, synthesis is when you put it all together to form a whole and build relationships. This is when you notice unique patterns and trends, or you combine elements in a new pattern or propose alternatives. So these are kinds of questions like, how would you improve blank? Right? And that could be about the plot or the characters, but it could also be about the author. How would you improve this book? How would you improve the way Capote told it? How would you have improved the investigation? Or how would you have improved the penalty or the time in jail or something like that? What changes would you make in order to blank? How would the outcome have changed if blank? How could or would a character improve something? What could be done to maximize or minimize? And that makes me think of like you guys as readers. What could be done to maximize interest in this book? What could be done to minimize drift off while you're reading? Things like that. Or could you propose an alternative for? Could you propose an alternative punishment? Could you propose an alternative investigation? Could you propose an alternative instead of slashing the clutter's throats or shooting them? What alternatives did Dick and Perry have? So those are synthesis and create questions. So why don't you pause the video and go over to that Google form and ask your synthesis question. And by then you should be done. So let's look at the form, right? You're simply putting in a recall question, putting in a comprehension question, right? Putting in a synthesis question, and then you're just hitting submit. So best of luck. I can't wait to see the questions that you guys ask, and make sure you ask good, fair, interesting questions, because they're the ones your classmates are going to be answering, and you don't want to stump them, but you also don't want to bore them either. So keep that in mind, and thank you for listening.